Okay, the topic for today is on vestibular system and its assessment. So the anatomy and physiology of the vestibular system was covered in the previous class, but to understand the assessment of the vestibular functions properly, it is important to revise the anatomy and the physiology again for better understanding. So when it comes to maintenance of balance, it is important for three systems to be very active. Uh, and also, if any one of the particular system involved is defective or there is some issues, there will be an issue in maintenance of balance. So the three most important organs are the ocular, the vestibulocochlear, and the proprioception and cerebellar functions. So proprioception and cerebellar functions, you can add it together or may mention it as third or fourth part. So the vestibulo-ocular reflex is very important because it deals with the semicircular canal. There are three semicircular canal: the anterior, the posterior, and the horizontal or the lateral semicircular canal. Anterior is also called as the superior semicircular canal, and the horizontal or the lateral semicircular canal, and the posterior semicircular canal. So the semicircular canal, they detect head rotation movements. So for that, say for example, from this image, which you can see here, if you can see my pointer, the right eye and the left eye. This is the lateral rectus, this is the medial rectus. This is the medial rectus for the left eye, the lateral rectus for the left eye. So all we know is the medial rectus is supplied by the third nerve, lateral rectus is supplied by the sixth nerve. Keeping that idea as basic, suppose we have to turn our eyes to the right side. All of you just try looking to the right, to the extreme right, like a gaze to your right, like how you tend to peek and look or try to look at some other notes or try to copy during exams, just for example. So you turn your gaze to look to the extreme right or to the left. So how does this work? How does the impulse reach the concerned area of your brain? So if you're looking to the right side, there are two important muscles which have to be stimulated. That is the right side lateral rectus and the left side medial rectus. So we will only focus on this darkened layer of light. So this is a maximum stimulus. So right lateral rectus, which is innervated by the abducens nerve, the strong stimulus comes from here and it reaches the abducens nuclei. Then it transverses to the opposite side through the vestibular nuclei and reaches the lateral horizontal semicircular canal. So in this regard, to the right turn movement, there is a response which is generated, and this in turn produces a stimulus which can be inhibitory to one area and excitatory to another area. So it starts sending these signals to the abducens nucleus. From there, it goes by crossing over through the medial longitudinal fasciculus, reaches the oculomotor nucleus, and stimulates the left side medial rectus so that our eye turn to the right side. This image is very important. So to revise the same, just focus on this dark line, right lateral rectus and left eye medial rectus. So these both are stimulated. Their stimulus reaches the abducens nucleus. From there, it reaches the vestibular nucleus on the opposite side and stimulates the horizontal semicircular canal, and that generates the response. So here, inhibitory nucleus fibers reach the ipsilateral left eye lateral rectus, and it crosses over this side. It crosses over the left side, crosses over to reach the right eye medial rectus, which has an inhibitory effect. So vestibular spinal reflexes here deals with the autolytic organ. Vestibular spinal is for autolytic organ, and vestibular ocular is for semicircular canal. So please remember this point. So vestibular spinal is when you are walking or you're maintaining a posture. Here your vestibular system and your cerebellar cortex are at maximum stimulation. So certain Purkinje fibers send their negative impulses through vestigial nucleus and also act at the level of the vestibular nuclei. And this response it's transmitted to the extremities by the lateral vestibular spinal fibers. So depending on the kind of response, whether it is flexor or extensor muscle response, they will be stimulated. So there is a role of gravity to play with this. So when there is a semicircular canal is filled by endolymph, so whenever there is a particular matter or an otolith organ or a otoconia debris inside this semicircular canal, there is a movement of this otoconial debris from one point to another point, or from one semicircular canal, uh, it may just reach till the cupula, that is near the ampullary end of the semicircular canal, and may cause certain disturbance in the vestibular apparatus, leading to imbalance and nystagmus. So there is a role that we have to remember, that the vestibular spinal, which deals with the otolithic organ, and the vestibular ocular reflex, it deals with the semicircular canal. So when both these are involved, there is a role of nystagmus which sets in. So the involvement of gravity when it comes to vestibular ocular reflex is not much, but when it comes to vestibular spinal reflex, the otolith, there is a role of gravity involvement. It is also important to remember two things about the nerve supply of the inner ear. So if you notice here, this is the picture of the labyrinth, the right membranous labyrinth, the posterior medial view. So if you look here, this is the anterior semicircular canal, this is the lateral semicircular canal, and this part is the posterior semicircular canal. This part is called the utricle, and this part is called the saccule. So if you look closely, this is the vestibular nerve, and this is the cochlear nerve, and this part is the vestibular cochlear bundle. So the nerve supply of the anterior semicircular canal, the utricle, and the lateral semicircular canal comes from the vestibular superior part of the vestibular nerve. And the nerve supply of the saccule and the posterior semicircular canal comes from the inferior division of the vestibular cochlear nerve. It is also important to know that the saccule receives dual nerve supply uh, from the superior vestibular nerve and also through the utricle, through the inferior vestibular nerve. So the saccule has a dual nerve supply. Also, as the facial nerve is in close proximity to these structures, the at the level of the geniculate ganglion, the nerve fibers sometimes reach to the superior vestibular nerve, the inferior vestibular nerve, and also the cochlear nerve. So, in case of a condition called Ramsay-Hunt herpes zoster orticus, where there is infection of the of the ganglion, especially the geniculate ganglion by the herpes simplex virus, there can be involvement of the facial muscles as well as some amount of hearing involvement, hyperacusis, because of the nerve fibers which are also supplying to the superior vestibular nerve, inferior vestibular nerve, and the cochlear nerve. It is also important to note that, as I mentioned earlier, that the saccule received dual nerve supply from the superior vestibular nerve and also from the utricular branches. It is important to note that the saccule also sometimes receives its nerve supply from the cochlear nerve branches. So this anastomosis is called Oates anastomosis, double ORTS, Oates anastomosis. So this contains the efferent fibers from the cochlea which may supply to the saccule. So in case of symptoms of in patients with vestibular neuronitis, when there is an upper respiratory tract infection, there is an inflammation of the vestibular nerve. There are also sometimes involvement of loss of hearing in such kind of patients. So that significance lies because of the involvement of the cochlear nerve branches supplying to the saccule. This is of theoretical importance, but we may also encounter this in practice. The blood supply of the inner ear. So the anterior semicircular canal, the horizontal semicircular canal, and the posterior semicircular canal, saccule, utricle, and the cochlea, they're all supplied by the basilar artery. So the basilar artery branches into the anterior inferior cerebellar artery, and from there the anterior vestibular artery ends up supplying the anterior semicircular canal, utricle, and the horizontal semicircular canal. So the anterior semicircular canal also supplies branches to the saccule, and here the main supply for the posterior semicircular canal also receives from the main cochlear artery. So the main cochlear artery uh, is a branch of the common cochlear artery, and the common cochlear artery and the anterior vestibular artery combine together to form the internal auditory artery or the labyrinthine artery. And the labyrinthine artery is a branch of the anterior inferior cerebellar artery, and that in turn is a branch of the basilar artery. So the posterior vestibular artery and the anterior vestibular artery supplies the labyrinth. So posterior vestibular artery mainly supplies the saccule and the posterior semicircular canal. Anterior vestibular artery mainly supplies the anterior semicircular canal, the utricle, and the horizontal semicircular canal. So it is important to understand the circle of Willis, as we described that the anterior inferior cerebral artery is a branch of the basilar artery. So if you look at this closely, the vascularity of all the structures are important. So in cases of anterior inferior cerebral artery infarct, there can be presentation in the form of lateral pontine syndromes, which is mainly the facial palsy, facial hemianesthesia, and cross-sensory loss in the sensation of face. So a little detail about the circle of Willis. The vertebral artery from both the sides join together to form the basilar artery. One of the branches here, which ends up in the basilar artery, is the anterior inferior cerebral artery, which is coming from which goes on to supply the labyrinth. And here, in the basilar artery, there are small branches in the pons, called the pontine artery. And then it divides to form the posterior cerebral artery, and also another branch to the superior cerebral artery. Here, there are descriptions mentioned what would happen if there is an infarct in this particular area. Basilar artery causes Lawton syndrome. Anterior inferior cerebral artery infarct causes a lateral pontine syndrome. Posterior inferior cerebral artery causes a lateral medullary syndrome or the Wallenberg syndrome. And branches from the vertebral artery, especially the anterior spinal artery, which combine together, if at all there is any infarct in this particular area, it may cause a medial medullary syndrome. So the vertebral artery is a branch of actually the subclavian artery at the right side, and from the left side, it is arising directly from the left subclavian artery. But right from the right side, it arises from the brachiocephalic. So, so another anatomical clinical aspect is on subclavian steal syndrome. Suppose if the left side subclavian artery is occluded, and the left vertebral artery ends up supplying the branches to the axillary artery, which reaches the upper limb. So this particular condition is called the subclavian steal syndrome. So because of the contralateral blood supply in the circle of Willis, that's how it starts stealing the blood and supplies the upper limb. So another topic which is very important, which covers the vestibular aspect, is the physiology. So the physiological part, the hair cells are nothing but mechanoelectrical transducer. So the hair cells, they contain the kinocilium, stereocilia, and tip links. So this image, which you can see, the tallest structure here is the kinocilium, and the smallest structures here is the stereocilia. And the small, still further areas which are voltage gated potassium channels are the tip links. So once these tip links open up, the potassium enters these channels and causes hyperpolarization and generation of action potential, and that's how stimulus is sent by releasing the vesicles, and this stimulus is sent through the nerve fibers here. So this is the electrophysiological, electromicroscopic view of the vestibular hair cells with the tip links. So what happens is the longest, the stereocilia and the kinocilium. The kinocilium is the tallest of all the fibers. So if it moves to one direction, as in this particular area to the right, it leads to excitation, that is release of potassium channels and potassium into the cytoplasm, and release of the neural transmitters and excitation. If it moves to the opposite direction, as in this image, it leads to inhibition. So in the utricle and saccades, these particular structures which are seen are the otoconia and the otoconial membrane. And these are the hair cells, supporting cells, and the nerve fibers surrounded by endolymph. So in the semicircular canal, the morphological polarization is similar to this pattern. The longest kinocilium, stereocilia, and the tip cells. And in the utricle and saccule, the pattern is different. The pattern is somewhat similar to the arrangements of the kinocilium around the stereola. Stereola is the central most prominent part in the saccule and the utricle. So if the kinocilium is directed away from the uh, stereola, as in this case, which is moving away, it is in the saccule. And when the stereocilium is directed towards the stereola, it is in the utricle. So this polarization is important when it comes to stimulation of the cells. So when it comes to crista ampullaris, that is, the ampulla is the dilated part of the semicircular canal, and this part is the macula of the saccule and the utricle. So you can see the pattern here of arrangement around the stereola. If it is directed away, it is in the saccule. If it is directed towards the stereola, it is in the utricle. So this is the polarization axis. So if you notice, the utricle is more horizontally arranged in the image here, and the saccule is more vertically arranged. So it is like a parasagittal section. This is of importance for knowing the orientation. So the semicircular canal, the anterior, lateral, and the posterior semicircular canal, and this part, which is the ampulla part, is the crista ampullaris, and it has a cupula. Cupula is something like a diaphragm. Here, the fluid from the endolymph doesn't transfer them to this side. So the spinning or head sensation movement stimulates the hair cells, and from that, this movement stimulates the hair cells and the stereocilia, kinocilium, and then it stimulates the response to the sensory nerve fibers. From here, the movement results in flow of the endolymph from this point to here. So cupula is pushed over and it stimulates the hair cell. But still, the otoconial debris stays here. It doesn't come to this point. So the orientation, so the mechanism of stimulation in utricle and saccule is uh, the linear acceleration of the head or the changes in the head position, and also the shift in the position of the otolithic membrane, and the defect of the stereocilia towards or away from the kinocilium, and stimulation or inhibition as described in the previous slides. So if you see here, if it is moving towards the kinocilium, it stimulates. If it is moving away, it causes inhibition. This is a cross section from the side showing the orientation of the left and the right lateral semicircular canals, so which makes a degree of 30 degrees. And this is an axial section where we note that the left anterior semicircular canal and the right posterior semicircular canal are parallel and oriented towards each other. And in the other side, the left posterior canal and the right anterior semicircular canal are parallel and oriented to each other. So this is the same previous slide which is mentioned earlier with regards to the vestibular ocular reflex, where the semicircular canal is stimulated on the basis of head rotation, and vestibular spinal reflex on the basis of otolithic organ, which are stimulated due to gravity. So semicircular canal, there is a movement of the eyes in response to head rotation. In otolith, the stimulus results in movement of the postural muscles in response to head tilts, that is in the sense of gravity, downward direction. Nystagmus is defined as an involuntary rhythmic movement of the eye. So it is a perception of spinning and inappropriate eye response. So which canal is involved? So to answer this question, we have to look at the direction of the nystagmus. So this point which I have underlined, so the nystagmus tells us which canal is involved, not the position of the positional maneuver which is done. To explain this part even better, so if at all a particular semicircular canal is involved and the nystagmus is directed towards that side as it is done for a particular test, then that particular semicircular canal is involved. Say when we are doing two or three other tests wherein we are looking more towards the horizontal semicircular canal, but when we are doing maneuvers with regards to the anterior semicircular canal, we are still seeing that the maneuvers which had elicited a nystagmus in the horizontal semicircular canal or the lateral semicircular canal is also being evident when tested for the anterior semicircular canal. This shows that it involves more about which canal is involved first. So to understand this better, any torsional, that means an upbeating nystagmus, it is more in favor for a posterior semicircular canal. Any downbeating torsional nystagmus, that means there's an intern rotation, then it is more in favor of an anterior semicircular canal. If there is a nystagmus which is directed horizontally, that means the eye is moving horizontally to one particular direction, it is more in favor of a lateral semicircular canal. So this gives us a rough idea about which particular canal is involved. Sometimes the same nystagmus can be elicited by doing other maneuvers too, but initially which particular maneuver was done to elicit that response, that particular semicircular canal is involved. So coming to the assessment of the vestibular functions, the assessment of the vestibular functions can be divided into two groups, that is clinical test and laboratory test. Clinical test includes spontaneous nystagmus, fistula test, Romberg's test, gait, fast pointing and falling, Halpic maneuvers or positional test, and the test for cerebellar dysfunction. The laboratory tests for vestibular functions are caloric test, electronystagmography, optokinetic test, rotation test, galvanic test, and posturography. Under caloric test, there is a modified Cobrac's test, Fitzgerald Halpic test, or the bithermal caloric test, or the cold air caloric test.